I never thought a single letter could change everything. But there it was, yellowed and brittle, tucked between pages 143 and 144 of Great Expectations, a book I'd shelved hundreds of times at Monroe Public Library without noticing anything unusual. My name is Sadie, and until that Tuesday afternoon, my life was as quiet as the library where I worked. The letter trembled in my hands as I unfolded it, the paper so delicate I feared it might crumble. My dearest Elizabeth, it began in elegant cursive. What we've done cannot be undone, but the Langstons must never know the truth. The money is yours. Use it wisely and keep our secret safe. Forever yours, HL. The date at the bottom read April 15th, 1992, exactly 1 month before I was born. I might have dismissed it as just another forgotten bookmark if I hadn't heard that name, Langston, whispered among the library trustees just yesterday. They'd mentioned a substantial donation coming our way from the Langston family. "Excuse me, is someone available to help?" The voice startled me. I quickly tucked the letter into my cardigan pocket and turned around. A man stood at the reference desk, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His presence commanded attention, but it was his eyes that caught me off guard, sharp and calculating, despite his warm smile. "Of course," I said, straightening my glasses. "How can I help?" "Preston Langston," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm looking for any records you might have about local property ownership from the early 1990s. My heart skipped. The letter in my pocket suddenly felt like it was burning through the wool of my cardigan. The 1990s. I managed to keep my voice steady. "That's quite specific." "Family research," he said, leaning slightly on the desk. "My father's particularly interested in a property that belonged to someone named Elizabeth Monroe." I froze. Elizabeth Monroe was my grandmother's name. "Monroe?" I echoed, trying to sound casual. "That's actually my last name." His smile widened, but something flickered in his eyes. "Is that right? What a fascinating coincidence." The way he said coincidence made me wonder if it was anything but. "The property records are in the basement archives," I said. "I can help you look them up, but it might take some time." "Time is something I have plenty of," Preston replied, checking his expensive watch, "especially for matters of family history." As I led him toward the archive stairs, I could feel his eyes on my back. The letter felt heavier with each step. My grandmother had passed away 5 years ago, taking whatever secrets she had to her grave. Or so I'd thought. "After you." Preston gestured at the door, still smiling that perfect smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The basement archives were my sanctuary, a place where I spent countless hours organizing and cataloging. But today, descending those familiar stairs with Preston Langston behind me, it felt more like walking into a trap. "You know," he said casually as we reached the bottom, "my mother always says there's no such thing as coincidence. Everything happens for a reason." I thought about the letter in my pocket, about my grandmother Elizabeth, and about the Langston name that suddenly seemed to be everywhere. "And what do you believe, Mr. Langston?" He paused, studying me with those calculating eyes. "I believe some secrets refuse to stay buried, Miss Monroe. Don't you?" In that moment, standing in the dim archive basement with a man who seemed to know more than he was saying, I realized my quiet life was about to become anything but. The Langston mansion loomed before me like something out of a Gothic novel, all stone and shadows in the fading evening light. I smoothed my department store dress, already regretting my decision to accept Preston's dinner invitation. The letter from the library still burned in my apartment safe, but its contents haunted my thoughts as I rang the doorbell. Preston answered with that same calculated smile. "Sadie, you look lovely." He kissed my cheek, his cologne expensive and subtle. "Though I must warn you, my mother's been in quite a state about meeting you. Should I be worried?" I tried to joke, but my voice wavered. "Just be yourself," he said, leading me inside. "That's what drew me to you in the first place." The grand foyer opened into a living room where Vivian Langston perched on an antique settee, a glass of wine held delicately in her manicured hands. Her husband Harold stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid as a soldier's. So this is the librarian, Vivian said, her tone making my profession sound like a curious affliction. Preston tells us you're quite resourceful. I caught the slight emphasis on that last word. The library has been my second home since childhood. My grandmother used to say, Monroe, did you say your name was? Harold interrupted, turning from the fireplace. Any relation to Elizabeth Monroe? My heart stuttered. She was my grandmother. Was. Vivian's eyebrows arched. Such a shame. When did she pass? 5 years ago. I accepted the wine Preston offered, grateful for something to do with my hands. Did you know her? This town has quite a long memory, dear, Vivian replied. Old families tend to cross paths. The butler announced dinner before I could press further. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed Preston's hand at the small of my back, gentle but possessive. The meal was elaborate, 5 courses of food I could barely pronounce. Between bites of something involving truffle oil, Vivian steered the conversation toward Preston's recent business successes. The Monroe Street development is finally moving forward, she announced, watching me over the rim of her wine glass. That old neighborhood needed updating, don't you think? I nearly choked on my wine. Monroe Street? That's where my grandmother's house is. Was dear, Harold corrected. The property's been acquired for redevelopment. Surely you knew. No. I set down my fork. The house is still in my grandmother's name. I have the deed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Preston's hand found my knee under the tablecloth, squeezing gently. Warning or reassurance? I couldn't tell. Legal oversights can be so tedious, Vivian sighed. Preston, darling, perhaps you could help Sadie understand the situation better? Mother. Preston's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. This isn't the time. When is the time, son? Harold's question cracked like a whip. Some matters require decisive action. I pushed my chair back, the screech of wood on marble startling everyone. Excuse me, I need some air. I found myself in a hallway lined with family portraits. Generations of Langstons stared down at me with familiar calculating eyes. The last photo showed a younger Harold with a woman who wasn't Vivian. The date caught my eye, 1992. They're quite something, aren't they? Preston's voice made me jump. The family portraits. Mother insists on updating them yearly. Why didn't you tell me about my grandmother's house? He stepped closer, his presence both comforting and threatening. Business is complicated, Sadie. Sometimes things get messy before they get better. Better for whom? Before he could answer, Vivian's voice floated down the hallway. Preston, dear, your father needs you in his study. He touched my cheek, his fingers warm against my skin. We'll figure this out. Trust me. As I watched him walk away, I remembered the letter in my safe and my grandmother's words from long ago. The Langstons take what they want. Sweet girl. They always have. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message to my old friend Fiona. I need your help. Something's not right with the Langstons. The reply came instantly. About time you noticed. Come over tomorrow. There's something you need to see. Fiona's apartment felt like stepping into another world after 3 months of being immersed in Preston's. No crystal chandeliers or Persian rugs here, just mismatched furniture and walls covered in protest posters. She handed me a coffee mug that read, "Well-behaved women rarely make history." You're not going to believe what I found, she said, pulling out a worn leather journal. Remember that internship I did at the Historical Society? This was in their restricted archives. The journal belonged to someone named Margaret Langston, Preston's aunt. The same aunt who'd mysteriously vanished in 1992, according to town gossip. Read the last entry, Fiona urged. My hands shook as I opened to the marked page. Vivian's gotten exactly what she wanted. Harold's choosing her over family loyalty. I can't stay silent about what they did to Elizabeth, but they've made it clear what happens to people who cross them. I'm leaving tonight. If anything happens to me, the entry ended there. Elizabeth. I whispered. My grandmother? Before Fiona could respond, my phone buzzed. Preston's name lit up the screen, along with a photo of the massive diamond ring he'd given me last week. The engagement still felt surreal. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Fiona asked. I let it go to voicemail. "What happened to Margaret Langston?" "That's the thing, nobody knows. The police ruled it a voluntary disappearance, but—" Fiona hesitated. "The Historical Society has records of large payments made to the investigating officer's family that same year." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Vivian. "Darling, we simply must discuss the engagement party. The governor's already RSVP'd." "You need to be careful," Fiona warned. "The Langstons don't just build properties. They build narratives. They bury inconvenient truths under layers of money and influence. Like they tried to bury whatever happened with my grandmother." The pieces were starting to fit together. The letter, the house, Margaret's journal. A knock at the door made us both jump. Through the peephole, I saw Preston in his perfectly tailored suit, looking concerned. "Sadie? I know you're in there. Mother's worried sick." I opened the door, but blocked his entry. "Did you know about your Aunt Margaret's journal?" His face went pale. Did you know what your parents did to my grandmother?" "It's complicated," he said, reaching for my hand. "Family matters always are. But we can make this right. Together." "Like you're making right what happened to my grandmother's house?" "That development project will benefit the whole community," he insisted. "Sometimes progress requires sacrifice." "Whose sacrifice, Preston? Margaret's? My grandmother's? Mine?" His expression hardened. "Don't throw away everything we could have together over ancient history." "Ancient history?" I pulled out my grandmother's letter from my purse. "This history isn't as ancient as you think." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "Where did you get that? Does it matter? What matters is what's in it. What your father did. What your mother covered up." Preston stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Sadie, please. We can work this out. I love you." "Do you? Or do you love the story you've created about us, the charitable heir and the grateful librarian?" "You're upset. Let me take you home." "I am home," I said, stepping back into Fiona's apartment, "with people who tell me the truth." "Don't do this," he warned. "Mother won't." "Won't what?" "Arrange another convenient disappearance." The words hung between us like a drawn weapon. Preston's face showed real fear for the first time. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said quietly. "No, but I'm starting to." I slipped off the engagement ring and pressed it into his hand. "Tell your mother I'll be keeping my grandmother's house. And if anything happens to me or Fiona, Margaret's journal goes public." As I closed the door on Preston's stunned face, Fiona whispered, "Holy shit." My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "We need to make copies of that journal. Lots of copies." The truth about the Langstons was finally coming to light, and I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The migraine hit me like a freight train 3 days after I returned Margaret's journal to Fiona for safekeeping. My vision blurred, and the library's fluorescent lights became daggers. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up. "You look like death warmed over," my coworker said when I emerged. "There's someone waiting for you at the reference desk." Harold Langston stood there, examining our rare books display with calculated interest. My stomach lurched again, but not from the migraine. "Miss Monroe," he said, not looking up, "I believe we need to discuss some property matters. I have nothing to say about my grandmother's house." "No." He finally turned, his eyes cold. "What about your medical records?" The room tilted slightly. "What?" "Terrible thing, those hereditary conditions. Your mother had similar symptoms before her accident, didn't she? Headaches, vision problems." He picked up a book, thumbed through it. "The Langston Family Foundation funds several excellent neurological research facilities." The threat was clear as crystal. "Is that what happened to Margaret?" My voice shook. "Did she have symptoms too?" His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened around the book. "My sister made unfortunate choices. Don't follow her path." My phone buzzed. "Fiona. 911. Storage unit broken into. Journal's gone." The room spun faster. I grabbed the desk to steady myself. "Ah," Harold said, watching my reaction. Bad news travels fast. Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere private? Actually, a new voice cut in. She's coming with me. Marissa Green, director of the women's shelter where Fiona volunteered, stood in the doorway. I'd never been so glad to see anyone in my life. This is a private matter, Harold said smoothly. Nothing's private in a public library, Marissa countered. Sadie, grab your things. You're taking sick leave. Harold's mask slipped for just a moment. Miss Monroe works for the library board. The Langston family. The library board reports to the city council. Marissa interrupted. Where, coincidentally, I just filed some very interesting historical documents. Insurance, you might say. I didn't miss Harold's flinch. My hands trembled as I gathered my purse. The migraine pulsed behind my eyes, but I forced myself to stand straight. Your father's journal, I said quietly. Margaret wasn't the only one who kept records, was she? The color drained from Harold's face. Marissa's hand found my elbow, steering me toward the door. The shelter has excellent security cameras, she said over her shoulder, and backup generators, just in case of power outages. In Marissa's car, I finally let myself shake apart. They took the journal. They'll destroy it. They took a journal, Marissa corrected, handing me a bottle of water and some pills. Not the copies Fiona and I distributed to very specific people last week. I stared at her. You knew this would happen? Honey, I've been watching the Langstons destroy lives for 20 years. Your grandmother was one of our first shelter residents, back when we opened. The pills stuck in my throat. What? She stayed 3 months. Then suddenly she had money, a house. Marissa's grip tightened on the steering wheel, and a promise to keep quiet about Harold's first wife.
My phone buzzed again.
Preston, please let me help you. Not everything is what it seems. Another message followed. Check your grandmother's house. Back garden, under the rose trellis. Trust me one last time. We need to go to Monroe Street, I told Marissa. She studied me in the rearview mirror. You sure that's wise? I thought about Margaret's journal, about my grandmother's silence, about the headaches that had plagued my mother before her accident. No, I admitted, but I'm done being afraid. Marissa nodded, turning the car toward my grandmother's house. Sometimes the only way past fear is through it. My phone buzzed one final time. Vivian, you're playing a dangerous game, dear. Remember, some secrets are better left buried. Like Margaret? Like my mother? Like my grandmother's truth, waiting under the roses? I turned off my phone. Whatever we found in that garden would change everything. I just hoped I was strong enough to face it. The metal box we unearthed from my grandmother's rose garden was small enough to fit in my hands, but heavy with secrets. My fingers trembled as I brushed away decades of dirt, revealing a familiar name etched into the lid. Margaret Langston. We should open it somewhere safe, Marissa warned, scanning the overgrown yard. A car door slammed nearby. Preston emerged from the shadows, his usual polish replaced by desperate dishevelment. Wait, he called out. There's something you need to know first. Marissa stepped between us. That's close enough. It's about Margaret, Preston said, stopping short. And your mother's accident. The box grew heavier in my hands. You mean her murder? Yes. His admission hung in the evening air. But not by who you think. Headlights swept across the garden. A black SUV pulled up, and Vivian stepped out, elegant as ever in her designer suit. Preston, darling, she called. Your father's waiting at home. This little treasure hunt is over. Tell her, I demanded, clutching the box tighter. Tell her what you just told me. Preston looked between us, years of conditioning warring with conscience on his face. Margaret wasn't father's victim, he finally said. She was mother's. Vivian's laugh cut through the tension.
Oh, sweetheart.
Have you been drinking again? We all know what the stress does to you. I found her journals, Preston continued. The real ones, hidden in the lake house. Preston. Vivian's voice turned sharp. Remember what happened last time you had these episodes? Like my mother's episodes? I challenged. Before her car's brake lines mysteriously failed? Such imagination, Vivian sighed. No wonder my son was drawn to you. He always did have a weakness for dramatic women. Like Margaret, I took a step forward. Is that why she had to disappear? Because she knew about you and Harold, about what really happened to his first wife. Something dangerous flashed in Vivian's eyes. Careful, dear. Some questions are better left unasked. Mother, Preston's voice cracked. I can't keep lying. Not after what you made me do to Sadie's grandmother. The world tilted. What? I was 17, he said. Mother told me Elizabeth Monroe was threatening our family, that if I didn't convince her to take the money and stay quiet, Father would go to prison. And now history repeats itself, Vivian mused, reaching into her purse. Though I must say, Preston, you're being far less cooperative this time. The gun she pulled out looked absurdly small in her manicured hands. Mother, don't. Hush, darling. Sometimes a mother has to clean up her children's messes. I clutched Margaret's box like a shield. Everything's already documented. Copies of the journals, letters, photos. All safely distributed. To whom? Vivian's aim didn't waver. That passionate friend of yours? The shelter director? Amazing how many tragic accidents can happen in a small town. You won't get away with this, Marissa said, her phone visible in her raised hands. Everything's being recorded. Vivian's smile turned predatory. Do you really think that matters? Money doesn't just buy silence, it buys truth. A police siren wailed in the distance. Vivian's composure cracked for just a moment. Last chance, Sadie dear. Hand over the box, sign over the house, and this all goes away. You can even keep Preston, though he clearly needs another stint in rehabilitation first. I looked at Preston, saw the years of manipulation written in his haunted eyes. Thought of my grandmother's silence, my mother's death, Margaret's disappearance. All those broken women, buried under Langston money and power. The siren grew closer. I opened the box. Inside lay a USB drive, photos, and a handwritten confession, Margaret's insurance policy, hidden by my grandmother all these years. No more deals, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. No more silence. Vivian's finger tightened on the trigger. Such a shame. You really would have made a lovely daughter-in-law. The garden exploded in red and blue lights as police cars surrounded the house. Some secrets refused to stay buried. And some roses bloom best in blood-soaked soil. The interrogation room felt colder than it should in August. Detective Mills slid crime scene photos across the table. Vivian sprawled in my grandmother's rose garden, red blooming across her designer blouse. The gun that had been in her hands now sat in an evidence bag, my fingerprints all over it. Just tell me again what happened after the struggle, Mills said, his pen hovering over his notepad. My court-appointed lawyer touched my arm. My client has already explained that Vivian Langston shot herself? Mills interrupted. Convenient story, considering your history with the family. Through the two-way mirror, I sensed others watching. Probably Harold, his army of lawyers already spinning this into another tragic accident. Like my mother's. Like Margaret's. The recording, I started. Corrupted, Mills cut in. And Miss Green's phone mysteriously malfunctioned. Technology, right? Of course it did. Langston money could buy anything, even digital silence. The door opened. Preston walked in, looking expensive and exhausted. My heart twisted despite everything. I need to speak with Miss Monroe, he said. Alone. Mills hesitated. Mr. Langston, given the circumstances. My father's lawyers are handling the paperwork now. Preston's voice carried that familiar weight of inherited authority. 5 minutes. Everyone filed out. Preston sat across from me, close enough to touch, far enough to hurt. They're dropping the charges, he said quietly. Just like that. Father's calling it a tragic accident. Mother's history of mental instability, the stress of recent events. He rubbed his face. The family name must be protected, after all. And Margaret's evidence? The USB drive. Missing from the scene, along with the box. Of course. I laughed, the sound brittle even to my ears. Your father works fast, Sadie. Preston reached for my hand. I pulled away. You can still walk away from this. The family's offering. More money? More silence. The words tasted like ashes. Like what you offer my grandmother? He flinched. I was 17.
Scared.
Mother said. You're not 17 anymore, Preston. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I found something else in the lake house, he finally said. About your father. My chest tightened. What about him? He didn't abandon you and your mother. He was going to expose everything. Mother's schemes, father's corruption. The night before he disappeared, he left evidence with his lawyer. Preston's voice dropped. The same lawyer who died in a house fire a week later. The room spun slightly. Why tell me this now? Because I'm done being their puppet. He slid a key across the table. Safety deposit box. First National. Everything you need is there. Margaret's original evidence, your father's documents, recordings of mother. He stood. I'm testifying against them, Sadie. All of it. They'll destroy you.
They already have.
His smile was sad. But maybe we can stop them from destroying anyone else. The door opened. Mills returned with Harold and 3 suits that screamed, expensive lawyer. Time to go, son, Harold said. The papers are ready. Preston straightened, that familiar mask sliding back into place. But his eyes met mine one last time, and I saw something I'd never seen before, freedom. Miss Monroe, one lawyer stepped forward. Your release papers. The family hopes you'll sign this non-disclosure agreement as well. I looked at the documents, then at Harold's carefully neutral expression. Thought about my father, my mother, my grandmother. About Margaret. About all the women whose stories ended in convenient accidents and comfortable silence. Actually, I said, I think I'll call a press conference instead. Harold's mask cracked. That would be unwise. Probably, I agreed. But I'm done being wise. I'm done being quiet. You have no evidence, he reminded me.
No witnesses. No.
She has me, Preston interrupted. And I have everything. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Harold's face hardened into something terrible. Then I hope you're both ready for war. I thought about the key in my pocket, about Marissa and Fiona waiting outside, about all the buried truths finally clawing their way to light. You know what, Mr. Langston? I stood, feeling stronger than I had in weeks. I think we are. The press conference was set for noon, but Harold Langston arrived at my grandmother's house at dawn. He stood on the porch like an undertaker, flanked by 2 men whose suits couldn't quite hide their shoulder holsters. We found Margaret, he said when I opened the door. My heart stopped. Where? The lake house. All these years, right under our noses. His laugh held no humor. Vivian was always theatrical that way. Preston's car pulled up behind Harold's. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Father, don't. Quiet. Harold's command cracked like a whip. You've done enough damage. Show me, I said. The lake house sat like a forgotten memory on the water's edge. Police tape fluttered in the morning breeze. Detective Mills stood waiting, his face grim. Found her in the basement, Mills said. Behind a false wall. Along with this. He handed me a water-damaged journal. Margaret's handwriting filled the pages, along with photographs. My father appeared in several, standing next to a younger Harold. They looked like friends. Your father was my partner once, Harold said quietly, before he grew a conscience. And Margaret? Knew too much. Like your father. Like your mother.
He sighed.
Like you. Preston moved closer to me. Father, please. You were supposed to handle this, son. Like before. Instead. Harold gestured at the scene. Now everything's exposed. Our legacy destroyed. Your legacy, Preston corrected, built on buried bodies and broken lives. Harold's mask finally cracked. Everything I did for you, to give you the power, the respect. The nightmares? Preston's voice shook. The guilt? Knowing what we did to Sadie's family? What I did, I said suddenly, understanding hitting like lightning. You never sent those threatening letters to my grandmother. Preston did. Preston flinched. I was 17. Mother said if I didn't convince her to take the money, father would go to prison. The family would lose everything. And now, Harold's hand moved toward his jacket. What's your excuse now? The truth, Preston said. Finally. The gun appeared in Harold's hand, but Mills was faster. In seconds, Harold was face down, cuffs replacing his Italian leather watch. Harold Langston, Mills recited, you're under arrest for the murders of Margaret Langston, James Monroe, and Catherine Monroe. As they led Harold away, he called back, you'll never prove anything. Money talks louder than truth. Not anymore. I held up Margaret's journal. The dead have started talking back. Later, sitting on the lake house dock with Preston, I watched the sun paint the water gold. I found something else, he said, pulling out an envelope. In Margaret's things. It's addressed to you. Inside was a single photograph, my father and Margaret, standing in this same spot. On the back, in Margaret's writing, James, I'll keep her safe. The truth will come out someday. She was protecting me, I whispered. All those years, like your grandmother protected you, like you protected the truth. Preston stood. The press is waiting. Are you ready? I thought about Margaret, about my parents, about all the secrets finally surfacing like bodies in a lake. Almost. I faced Preston. Why did you really come back? After all these years. Because you reminded me of who I was before them. Before the lies. He smiled sadly. And because someone had to break the cycle. We're not them, I realized. We never were. No, he agreed. We're the ones who tell the truth. As we walked toward the waiting cameras, I felt lighter. The truth wouldn't bring back the dead, wouldn't erase the past. But it would light the way forward, like sun on dark water, showing us where the bodies lay and how to avoid making more. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying your enemies, but in refusing to become them. 1 year later, I stood in front of my grandmother's restored Victorian, now transformed into the Monroe House Women's Shelter. The roses still bloomed in the garden where Vivian had fallen, where Margaret's truth had finally surfaced. Different flowers now, planted by different hands, but still reaching for the light. Marissa joined me on the porch, clipboard in hand. Third resident moved in today. Former Langston employee, if you can believe it. I can, I said, watching a young woman unpack her car, a child balanced on her hip. How many does that make now? Who escaped that family? Or who found safety here? Both, I suppose. The shelter had become something of a symbol in town. Harold's trial had exposed decades of corruption, abuse, and silence. When the dust settled, more women came forward. Not just from the Langstons, but from other powerful families who'd learned from their example. Fiona emerged from inside, carrying boxes of donated books. Look what just arrived from the library board. Let me guess, approved unanimously? Amazing what happens when half the board gets indicted for corruption.
She grinned.
Though Preston's testimony probably helped. Preston. His name still caught in my throat sometimes. He'd turned state's evidence, helping dismantle his family's empire piece by piece. Last I heard, he was working with advocacy groups, using his insider knowledge to expose similar patterns in other wealthy families. We hadn't spoken since the trial. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. Package came for you, Marissa said, handing me a small envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was a key and a note. The lake house is yours now. Do with it what you will.
P.
Speaking of the devil, Fiona nodded toward the street. Preston stood by his car, looking less polished than I remembered. More human. When our eyes met, he simply nodded, then drove away. That evening, I visited the lake house one last time. In the basement where they'd found Margaret, I discovered one final letter, hidden in a wall panel we'd missed before. Dear Sadie. It read in my grandmother's handwriting. If you're reading this, then Margaret's plan worked. She knew the truth would surface eventually, that you would be the one to bring it into the light. Your father believed the same. We couldn't save ourselves, but we could leave breadcrumbs for you to follow. The house is yours now, both houses. Make them places of refuge, not remembrance. Love, Grandma Elizabeth. 2 days later, we broke ground on the lake house renovation. It would become a second shelter location, focusing on longer-term housing and job training. You know, Marissa said as we watched the construction begin, revenge usually leaves people empty. But this, she gestured at the growing community around us. This feels like justice. Maybe that's the difference, I replied. Revenge looks backward, but justice looks forward. That night, I added my own letter to the collection, not hidden in walls or books, but displayed openly in the shelter's entrance hall. To those seeking refuge, this house has witnessed both darkness and light. It has held secrets and lies, but also truth and healing. Like you, it has survived. Like you, it has been transformed. Welcome home. The roses still bloom in my grandmother's garden, and sometimes, when the evening light hits them just right, I swear I can see Margaret there, and my father and my mother and all those who kept their secrets so that one day we could speak our truth. But more often, I see the future. Women finding their voices, children playing without fear, stories being rewritten. Not everyone gets justice in the way they expect. Sometimes it comes generations later, carried forward by those left behind. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't in destroying what hurt you, but in building something new from the ruins, something that ensures no one else will hurt the same way again. That's the story I choose to tell now, every day, to every woman who walks through our doors. Your pain is power, your truth has teeth, and your future is still unwritten.
"Thanks for quitting," Emily sneered as she glared at me. I just stared back in silence. It's all about cutting labor costs. We don't need someone who's always exploiting overtime. Tom looked pleased as well. A week later, the company kept calling me. "Hello," I answered, and the president's voice came through. "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but laugh at his question. "I am Elizabeth Johnson. I turned 59 this year. I've been working at this company for 37 years since graduating from college. Our company is staffed with administrative scriveners, social insurance labor consultants, and tax accountants handling clerical work for our clients. This is especially popular with company presidents who run their businesses alone. These presidents are busy with sales and lack the time for clerical work, so our company takes care of it for them. I belong to the tax department. I got my bookkeeping and tax accountant qualifications during my school days, and that's why I joined this company. Now, I'm managing 45 clients, which keeps me quite busy. Even though a part-timer handles the accounting entries, it's still overwhelming. But I can't show any weakness. Our clients are all long-term relationships, and many of them have had their fair share of hardships. Seeing them face adversity, I feel I can't lose either. So here I am in front of my computer again today. Lately, I've been troubled. Tom and Emily have been subjecting me to insidious harassment. Tom, 7 years younger than me, is the head of the tax department. He used to be just a regular colleague, but his attitude changed drastically 3 months ago when he got promoted. He used to speak politely, but suddenly he started talking down to me. "Elizabeth, what are you doing? You've got some nerve slacking off during work hours." He's always either sarcastic or complaining. "I'm looking at documents for tax-saving strategies for our clients." Even when I retort, Tom remains unfazed. "Just check the manual for that. Don't do anything unnecessary. And if you end up working overtime, don't expect to get paid for it." Tom glared at me with those words, and I was unable to respond. Emily, Tom's assistant, chimed in. "Elizabeth, you should work more efficiently. At this rate, you'll never finish. That's why you're still a rank-and-file employee." Emily laughed mockingly. I was the first to be offered the promotion to department head, but I declined at the time. Becoming a head meant more time for management and less for client interaction. However, it was an internal offer, so Tom and Emily don't know about it. "I'll make sure to complete my regular duties as well," was all I could manage to say. Still, Tom and Emily's harassment continued. "You're increasing overtime again? What a waste of overtime." Tom's angry voice echoed again today. "Elizabeth, cut it out. Your constant overtime is dragging down the whole tax department's performance." Emily sighed as she spoke. The reason for yesterday's overtime was simple. Tom had accumulated a month's worth of declaration forms to be filed by the end of the month. After work yesterday, Tom suddenly said, "Take care of these." He left several client files on my desk. I turned pale when I saw the files. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" As I said this in confusion, Tom was already nowhere near. Looking for him, I saw he was already packing up at his desk. "I'm heading out. Take care." With that, Tom quickly left the office. "Good luck, okay?" Emily followed Tom out, laughing mockingly. Unbelievable. I sighed and opened the client files left on my desk. Moreover, some of the files were Emily's responsibility. I sighed even deeper. I knew why Tom was harassing me, because they wanted me to retire quickly. I have more experience and deeper knowledge in taxation than him. As a result, other members of the tax department come to me with their questions instead of Tom. There are other reasons why everyone avoids Tom. He looks greasy and unapproachable. The only female employee who stays near him is Emily. Tom likes young women, and that's probably why he wants me to retire, to get the other female employees to rely on him more. It's such shallow thinking. It gives me chills. There's also the fact that he simply doesn't like me. Emily was harassing me to curry favor with Tom. Tom is the one who evaluates the performance of the tax department, so she probably wanted to undermine me to get a good evaluation from him. Anyway, I have to manage these declarations. Not only do I have to prepare the tax declarations for my assigned companies, but it looks like I won't be able to finish today's work either. But if I try to claim overtime, I'll just get complaints from Tom and Emily. I resigned myself to unpaid overtime. Then one day, I was suddenly called to the president's office. Our company had just had a change of president. Originally, the president's father had been managing the company since its founding, and it had only recently been handed over to his son. The son had always worked at another company and still wasn't fully acquainted with our company, but it couldn't be helped since the former president had suddenly fallen ill and he had to take over. Excuse me. As soon as I entered the president's office, I noticed Tom and Emily, and for some reason, they both had unpleasant smirks on their faces. "Why are Tom and the others here?" I muttered quietly enough that no one else would hear. In this tense and strange atmosphere, the president spoke. "Elizabeth, we'll need you to resign by the end of this month." "Excuse me? What do you mean?" I asked the president, my mind in a whirl. "I heard from Tom and Emily you've been overbilling for overtime, right? Other members of the tax department have only about 15 hours of overtime per month, but Elizabeth, you're already over 80 hours. Don't you find that odd? Tom and Emily have 0 overtime this month. Impressive, right?" The president looked at me sternly. The reason my overtime was so high this month was that I was doing Tom and Emily's work. But if I said it was Tom's instructions, it would seem like my own inability to manage time. So I just stated the facts. I haven't overbilled for overtime. It's a result of not being able to finish my work within regular hours. The president sighed deeply. "I'm doubtful, but there's no evidence, so I won't pursue it further. However, we can't continue to employ someone who works that slowly, so I want you to resign." The president's mind seemed made up. Me being told to leave the company I had dedicated my entire 37-year career to, I was tired too. No matter how much more I did beyond my own work, it was never appreciated. Instead, I ended up having to take on Tom and Emily's work as well. Yes, I understand. I'll resign at the end of this month. I realized I had already said that to the president. I glanced at Tom and Emily. They were smiling vulgarly, looking very pleased. After leaving the president's office with the three of them, Emily looked at me and said, "Thanks for quitting." Emily sneered and looked at me. I just silently stared back at Emily. Tom also looked down on me in the same way. We're cutting labor costs. We don't need a hag who exploits overtime pay in our company. Tom seemed pleased too. While watching the two of them talk so cheerily, I thought about the handover process and then started creating the handover documents for all my clients. Of course, I didn't miss saying goodbye to the people I was handing over to. I tried to get an appointment with the president to say goodbye in person. For the presidents I couldn't meet, I sent letters and informed them of my successor. A week after I resigned, I was relaxing at home. I had been busy with the handover until my resignation, and I had been extremely busy even before that. A little relaxation shouldn't be a problem. As I was thinking about this, my mobile phone rang. When I checked the call, it was from the company. What could they want now? I made sure to take care of the social insurance procedures. I didn't answer the phone, but then the company called several more times. In fact, I had also received several calls from Tom and Emily's personal mobile phones. Maybe they thought I'd answer if it was from the company. Reluctantly, I decided to answer. "Hello? Elizabeth, it's a mess right now." As soon as I answered, the president spoke. "Who exactly are you?" I laughed mockingly at the president's words. Who am I? Just an unemployed lady. I've resigned from the company and I'm nothing else, right? Then the president spoke urgently. "Since Elizabeth left, we've had 49 calls to stop transactions with the company. Please come back to the company immediately." The president said his piece and hung up. He must be really panicked. I guess I have no choice. I got up reluctantly and headed to the company. As soon as I arrived, Tom and Emily were waiting. Both of their faces were pale, and they both had dark circles under their eyes. "What's wrong with both of you?" I asked, surprised at their drastic change in appearance. Then Tom glared at me and said, "Since then, we've been getting calls one after another to stop transactions. Not just from your clients, but from prospective companies we were planning to introduce." "What did you do?" Emily also looked at me with suspicion. I never thought Elizabeth would do something so underhanded. I'm truly disillusioned. They both looked so haggard. It was probably due to dealing with the cancellations, and probably the body, of course. I hadn't done anything to the clients, but I had a guess why they were canceling their transactions. Well, the cancellations might be unavoidable this time. As I muttered this, Tom yelled, "So you did do something, didn't you? Get to the president's office now." I was then taken to the president's office by Tom. "President, I brought her," Tom declared with force as he opened the door. Emily followed in a hurry. "Oh, I've been waiting," the president said as he looked me in the eyes. Tom accused me as if I was the culprit. "It appears that Elizabeth was involved in the cessation of transactions with our clients. We should not only make her resign, but also sue her for damages," Emily argued vehemently, though her language was careful in front of the president. The president ignored them and asked me, "Why did so many companies stop transactions after Elizabeth left?" I took a deep breath and answered clearly, "Don't you understand? Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are tax accountant firms that do it cheaper." Yet they continued with us because I was here. Tom snapped at me. "What's with that attitude towards the president? And you think you're worth that much?" Emily also taunted. There's no way it has to be Elizabeth. The president looked serious. Tom and Emily work based on the manual, optimizing operations. But I do more than that. I offer tax-saving strategies tailored to our clients' situations. Uniform responses don't always serve the client's best interests. In fact, many clients preferred my approach and stayed because of it. Tom got angry at my explanation. How can we afford to give such detailed attention to each case? It takes too much time. That's right, it's inefficient, Emily strongly agreed. Then the president sighed deeply and said, "Actually, I just got a call from Dad, the former president. Some of the clients who stopped transactions had gone directly to Dad to negotiate about Elizabeth. I was surprised to hear this. I hadn't expected the clients to go that far for me. Dad said that the tax department was viable because of Elizabeth. She not only managed her clients, but also supported her colleagues and clients. She has knowledge that Tom can't match. Dad also said that if Elizabeth hadn't declined, she would have been in a higher position than a department head by now." The president spoke with a pained expression. No way." Emily looked shocked. She probably couldn't believe I might have been her boss. The president continued, "I'm really sorry to have made you resign once, but can we revoke your resignation? Elizabeth, you're needed at our company. My father also strongly said so. I was honestly happy about the president's changed opinion, but I couldn't accept it then." Tom interrupted our conversation. "President, what do you mean she's better than me?" "I can't accept this." Tom was visibly upset. Emily also protested. "Tom is a wonderful boss who cares for his subordinates, and yet you choose Elizabeth over him. That's unacceptable." The president then looked sternly at them. "Actually, since Elizabeth resigned, we've been receiving numerous complaints from the tax department. You two seem to have been pushing your work onto others, haven't you?" "What? Why would you?" Tom's face turned pale. The president started speaking with a look of disgust. "I've heard from the employees, Tom. You've been pushing the preparation of your clients' declaration forms onto your subordinates, including Emily's work for many clients." Next to Tom, who was getting paler, Emily trembled when her name was mentioned. "There was a leak saying you've been pushing your work onto Elizabeth until she resigned. Tom, you were calling her a salary thief. It seems the roles are reversed, aren't they?" The president spoke with a sigh. "No, that's not all." Tom was visibly flustered, seemingly unable to come up with an excuse. Observing Tom and Emily turning pale together, the president continued. "Also, there was a leak that you two are in a relationship. You were often seen leaving work together. But Tom, you're married, aren't you?" The president glared at Tom and Emily. I was just mentoring Emily as her superior. Nothing inappropriate. Tom struggled to find the words. When the president produced several receipts, he continued, "These are receipts queried by the accounting department. These dining expenses were filed by Tom. Who were they with? Certainly not with clients, right?" Tom was sweating profusely, unable to speak. Emily's face turned ghostly pale. "Tom and Emily, you've neglected your duty and inflated expense claims. Plus, you're having an affair in the office despite being married. According to company policy, I'm terminating your employment as of today," the president told them calmly and straightforwardly. Tom and Emily tried to resist. "Please wait. I'll retract the receipt claims. Just don't fire me. I have a family." Tom desperately tried to reverse his firing. Emily did the same. "Please, I don't want to be fired." Emily was on the verge of tears. Realizing the severity of being fired for neglecting work and having an affair with a supervisor, she must have been worried about her reputation. I advised Tom and Emily, "Why don't you just stop resisting? It's undignified." Tom glared at me. Shut up. What would a single person like you understand? I sighed and said, Tom, you were the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit? Damn it. Tom looked frustrated. Emily bit her lip. I haven't reported this yet, but there's more to Tom and Emily's misconduct. Should I share more details? I asked the president with a smile. Tom and Emily's behavior was well known in the tax department. Their stories had reached me whether I liked it or not. No, please don't, Elizabeth said. Both were frantically trying to stop me. I gave them an ultimatum. Wrongdoings eventually come to light. It would be better for you to face reality before it gets worse. In my words, both of them collapsed to their knees. Ultimately, Tom and Emily were fired on the spot. I revealed their misdeeds afterward, including Tom faking business trips to go out with Emily for days and harassing employees they disliked into quitting. I tried to help those employees, but Tom and Emily's tactics were insidious. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight. It was also common for them to suddenly assign work with tight deadlines. The employees who resigned asked me to keep quiet, but now they are happily working at other companies. So I decided it was okay to speak up. The president was furious at my revelation. He expressed his anger about cutting their final salary. He also planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Tom was begging the president, tears in his eyes. Please don't cut my salary. What will I tell my family if they find out? Eventually, Tom and Emily's affair was exposed to Tom's wife. Tom ended up getting divorced. The two are now facing claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit. I know this because, for some reason, Tom contacted me. Please, can you persuade the president to reconsider the firing? Emily and I are in a real bind now. Apparently, Tom and Emily are struggling to find new jobs. The tax industry is somewhat insular. If you commit too many misdeeds, word spreads quickly through the industry's network. That's why no one is willing to hire Tom and them. However, they need money for the divorce compensation and living expenses. So now they're working day labor, like at construction sites. People used to office work suddenly doing hard labor outdoors must be tough. Emily often calls me crying. Elizabeth, please help. I just wanted a raise and a better life. I never really liked Tom, and this situation is unbearable, Emily would say, crying. However, Tom and Emily's predicament is their own doing. Many people, including myself, have been victims of their actions. So I told Emily, this is all your own fault. You can't unring a bell. It will be hard to return to the same path. You're just going to have to deal with the hardships. No way, Emily cried out in despair. This was the outcome of Emily's actions. I hope she continues to regret her actions in the future. As for me, I'm still enjoying a relaxed lifestyle away from work. The president has been begging me to return, but I have declined. After being told once to resign, I don't think I'll go back. Sometimes I help out at a friend's tax office to earn a bit of money. Maybe once things settle down, I'll start my own office. Like my friend in my own office, no one can complain about my working style. I can fully dedicate myself to my clients. As a tax accountant, I want to be on equal footing with my clients, not as a teacher, but as part of the service industry. My second life has just begun. I'm looking forward to delving into what I want to do next. I grew up in Alaska, a place as rugged as it is stunning. Dad always said the cold kept us sharp and tough. He built his life here, turning a rickety boat into a thriving fishing business. Work was his everything, and I think he liked the solitude of the sea. It suited his stoic nature. When Dad's new wife, Clara, entered our lives, I was still grieving Mom. Clara had the warmest smile I'd ever seen. From the first moment we met, she made me feel at home. It wasn't easy for her to join our ready-made family, but she never let on. She and Dad met at a community dance, and she joked later about how his 2 left feet didn't scare her away. "Emily, your dad could sink a ship with those dance moves, but somehow he caught me," she'd laugh, making pancakes on a Saturday morning. Clara didn't have any kids of her own, and she dived into being my stepmom without a second thought. Looking back, I guess she was what held everything together, especially when Dad was off at sea. I was close to Dad, but he wasn't much of a talker. His way of showing love was through actions, like the time he built a swing set overnight, so I'd have a surprise in the morning. "Dad, you're crazy. It's freezing out there." I remember pulling my jacket tighter, watching him out the window, working under the harsh light of a single bulb. "Nah, just determined," he'd called back, his breath clouding in the icy air. "Anything for my girl." My best friend Mia lived just down the road. She was fiery, a redhead with a temper to match. We're going to get out of this frozen wasteland. Watch me," Mia would vow, her eyes fierce. We'd sit by the fire, planning our futures in grand cities with sun and no snow. After high school, everything felt too small, too familiar. I craved something different, something warmer. California was calling, a place as sunny as Alaska was cold. I'd spent nights dreaming of beaches and palm trees, anything but ice. Dad wasn't thrilled at first. The distance bothered him. "You sure about this, Emily? California's a long way from here," Dad frowned, his hands deep in his pockets as he spoke. "Dad, I love it here, but I got to see what's out there. Plus, I can always come back." I tried to sound more confident than I felt. Clara was the one who smoothed things over, like always. "Let her go, Jack. She'll be fine. She's got your stubbornness, doesn't she?" In the end, Dad agreed, his gruff voice softer than usual. "All right, but call your old man sometimes, yeah? Don't forget where you come from." Landing in California was like stepping onto another planet. I enrolled at the university, eager to dive into my economic studies. The campus was sprawling, lush with greenery I'd only seen in magazines. My first day, I remember feeling a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling up as I navigated through crowds of students, all seeming to know exactly where they were going. I was just trying to find my first class without looking like a lost puppy. "Hey, you look a bit lost first day," a voice called out from behind. I turned to see a girl about my age, her skateboard tucked under one arm, a grin spread across her face. "Is it that obvious?" I replied, trying to muster a smile while adjusting the heavy backpack slipping off my shoulder. "Only to a fellow newbie. I'm Jess," she said, extending her free hand. "Emily, nice to meet you, Jess," I managed, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, friendly. Jess became my first friend in California. She was from San Diego, so not quite a local, but close enough to give me pointers. "You'll get used to it. Everyone's from somewhere else here," she reassured me as we walked to class together. Classes were tough, but I thrived on the challenge. Economics made sense to me. It was numbers and patterns, a language I understood well. During a group project, I caught the eye of a teaching assistant, Mark, who seemed to always find a reason to linger by my side. "You've got a sharp mind for economics. Ever consider going into finance?" Mark asked one afternoon as we reviewed my project draft. "I'm more into the big picture stuff, not just moving money around," I said, not wanting to admit how little I knew about the finance world. Fair enough, but think about it. You'd be good, he nudged, a playful smirk on his face. Mark was different from anyone I'd met. He had this easy charm, a quick wit, and a smile that could disarm you in an instant. We started seeing each other outside of class, casual coffee dates that turned into long walks, talking about everything and nothing. But it wasn't all playful banter and sunsets. Sometimes I'd catch a sharpness in Mark's tone when things didn't go his way, a hint of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Still, I brushed it off as stress or the occasional bad day. We all had them. University life passed in a blur of exams, late-night study sessions, and more time with Mark. Before I knew it, graduation was upon us. Then one day, Mark said it was time I met his mom. I was nervous, but excited to finally meet the woman he always praised. "So, you're the girl who's captured my son's heart," she said, giving me a tight hug that caught me off guard. Inside, she was all questions, poking around every part of my life from Dad's fishing business to where I went to school. "Emily, with your background and how well you and Mark get along, we should really be thinking about a wedding soon, don't you think?" she suggested over dinner, her tone casual but eyes sharp with expectation. I almost choked on my water. "Oh, that's a bit fast, isn't it?" I managed, glancing at Mark, who just smiled like it was nothing new. "Oh, not at all. When things feel right, why wait?" She pressed on, her enthusiasm making me squirm a bit in my seat. Despite the intensity, I was flattered by her approval and found myself nodding along, caught up in the moment. After Mark's proposal, things moved pretty fast. Before I knew it, we were planning a wedding. I had always imagined something small and intimate, but Mrs. White, Mark's mom, had other ideas. "I think a big wedding is what you deserve, Emily. Something to really start your life together off with a bang," Mrs. White enthused one afternoon as we pored over bridal magazines at her kitchen table. The wedding was a blur of faces, flowers, and fast-paced music. It was beautiful, sure, but by the end of the night, my feet ached and my head spun, not just from the champagne. It all felt more like Mrs. White's party than our wedding. We moved into Mrs. White's house right after the honeymoon. She insisted, "You two should save up before getting your own place. Stay with me. I have plenty of room." It made sense financially, and honestly, the house was lovely, spacious, and sunny with a big garden. The first few months, Mrs. White was the perfect host. She cooked dinners, kept the house spotless, and always had stories to tell about her younger days. But as we settled in, the dynamic began to shift. Slowly, she started asking me to help around more and more. "Emily, could you handle dinner tonight? My back is acting up something fierce," she'd say. "Of course, Mrs. White," I'd reply, happy to help out. However, helping out soon turned into taking over dinners every night, cleaning on weekends and laundry. It all became my job. I didn't mind at first. I wanted to contribute, but I started to miss my independence, my time. One evening, after a particularly long day of scrubbing and cooking, I sat down with Mark. "Do you think your mom could help out a bit more? I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed," I ventured. He was quick to defend her. "Mom's not feeling well these days, Emily. We can't expect her to do all the things she used to." "But it's a lot for me, too," I pressed, hoping he'd see my side. Mark looked frustrated. "Look, she's letting us stay here rent-free. The least we can do is make sure she's comfortable. She's done enough in her life, don't you think?" I nodded, silenced by his tone. The conversation ended there, but the workload didn't. Each request from Mrs. White piled up until I felt more like a maid than a daughter-in-law. It wasn't just the housework. Mrs. White had opinions on everything: what I wore, how I should style my hair, what Mark and I should spend our money on. Things came to a head one day over dinner. I had spent hours making what I thought was a perfect roast, her favorite. We sat down to eat, and after a few bites, Mrs. White frowned. "This meat is a bit tough, don't you think, Mark?" Mark chewed thoughtfully, then nodded. "Yeah, Mom's right. A bit tough." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. "I followed the recipe exactly," I said, my voice sharper than intended. Mrs. White tutted. "No need to get snippy, dear. Just some constructive criticism." That night, as I washed the dishes, tears of frustration mixed with the soapy water. This wasn't the life I had imagined when I said yes to Mark. Life with Mrs. White took a sharp turn one ordinary evening. We were finishing dinner when she dropped the news like a cold splash of water. "I've been to the doctor today, and, well, it turns out I have some serious health issues. I can't keep up with the housework anymore." I glanced at Mark, searching his face for some kind of reaction. He seemed concerned but calm, as if he had been expecting this. Turning to me, he said, "Emily, I think it might be best if you quit your job to take over here, just until Mom gets better." The suggestion hit me like a ton of bricks. Quit my job? The job I love that gives me a sense of independence? "Mark, I'm not sure about this. It feels extreme," I said. He took my hand, giving it a squeeze that was meant to be reassuring. "I know it's a lot to ask, but we need to take care of my mom. It's temporary, I promise." So I did it. I quit my job, telling myself it was just for a while. But as weeks turned into months, the temporary arrangement started to feel alarmingly permanent. Mrs. White, citing her poor health, retreated completely from any household duties. Everything fell on me, from cooking and cleaning to managing every little detail of our home. I tried to keep up, to make everything perfect, so that at least she'd be happy, but it was never enough. She followed me around, pointing out spots I had missed or how the windows weren't shining enough. "Emily, you really should pay more attention to these things," she'd say, her voice sharp with disapproval. Cooking became another battlefield. No matter how carefully I followed recipes or tried new dishes, her verdict was always the same. "This is quite bland, Emily. Are you sure you added salt?" Yet every plate returned to the kitchen wiped clean, which only added to my confusion and frustration. One evening, after a particularly tough day when I had spent hours trying to get the laundry just right, I reached my breaking point. "Mark, can we talk? Your mom is never happy with what I do. I'm trying my best here." We were in our room, a small space that felt like the only escape from the constant surveillance. He looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. "Mom's just set in her ways, Emily. She likes things a certain way. You'll get used to it." Get used to it? The words echoed in my head, bitter and sharp. "I'm not sure I want to get used to it. This isn't what I signed up for when we got married." He sighed, his patience wearing thin. "What do you want me to say, Emily? That you can stop helping my mom? She's sick. She needs us." "But what about what I need?" I pressed, my voice rising with desperation. "I need support, Mark. I need to feel like I'm more than just a maid in this house." Mark stood up, his tone final. "My mom comes first right now. She's ill, and that's just how it has to be." The old washing machine had been acting up for weeks, making more noise than a freight train. I should have known it was on its last legs, but I hoped it would hold out a little longer. That hope died the day it finally broke mid-spin with a loud bang and a shudder that shook the whole utility room. Water leaked all over the floor, and I stood there, frozen, staring at the soapy mess. Mrs. White stormed in, her face twisted in anger as soon as she saw the broken machine. "Look what you've done now. That was a high-quality machine, Emily. Your carelessness is costing us a fortune." I tried to explain. "It's been acting up for a while, Mrs. White. It was bound to break down sooner or later." "Well, you'll just have to replace it, and I expect you to pay for it," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. My heart sank. "But I don't have that kind of money right now," I said, the panic rising in my voice. "Then call your father. He can pay for it," she retorted dismissively. I hated the idea of asking Dad for money. He had already done so much for me. But Mrs. White insisted, and there was no arguing with her when she got like this. So I called Dad, explaining the situation as simply as I could, without letting on how bad things had gotten. True to form, he didn't ask any questions, just quietly agreed and transferred the money. That should have been the end of it, but it was just the beginning. Mrs. White had tasted victory, and she pushed for more. Soon, she was finding excuses for more expenses. Money for her so-called accommodations, then house repairs. "This place needs to be up to standard. I deserve to live in a nice environment," she declared one day, looking around with a critical eye. Each request for money became a production. Mrs. White made sure I looked presentable. Makeup carefully applied to hide the dark circles under my eyes. Hair done nicely before I made the video calls to Dad. She hovered just out of sight, ensuring I said the right things, smiling at the right moments. Dad, bless him, never hesitated to help, sending whatever was asked without fail. But with each transfer, I felt more trapped, more like a puppet in Mrs. White's hands. She took the phone away as soon as each call was over, cutting off any chance for me to tell Dad the real story. As months passed, the house transformed under a series of renovations that Mrs. White dictated. New furniture arrived, old wallpaper was replaced, and soon she even bought a new car to cruise around the local boutiques and malls, all funded by Dad, all at her command. Meanwhile, I was left to manage not just the endless chores, but also the mounting guilt of seeing Dad's hard-earned money being spent on luxuries while I could barely cover my own needs. Ever since the wedding, Marka had been drifting further away from the man I married. He became harsh, dismissive, and seemed to prefer the company of his friends at the bar over coming home. I had started to feel more like a nuisance than a wife, and the thought of divorce had been creeping into my mind more and more. But then I found out I was pregnant. I pushed those thoughts aside, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the news of the baby would bring us back together, soften both him and his mother. But I was wrong. When I told Mrs. White about the pregnancy, her eyes sparkled not with joy for the forthcoming grandchild, but with the anticipation of the financial leverage she now held over me. "You'll need to ask your father for more money," she said without missing a beat. "Babies are expensive, and we need to be prepared." Mark's reaction was even more disheartening. He barely looked up from his phone when I told him, and his subsequent comments about my changing body were cruel and cutting. "Looks like you're ballooning up already," he'd sneer, making me feel even more isolated and vulnerable. As the months wore on, the situation only worsened. After our son was born, I was overwhelmed. He was a beautiful, fussy infant who rarely slept through the night. I was exhausted, always trying to catch up on sleep, comfort our baby, and somehow keep up with the endless demands of housekeeping and cooking. Mrs. White and Mark expected the home to be spotless and dinner to be on the table, regardless of how little sleep I'd gotten. One afternoon, running on mere snippets of sleep, I tried to cook dinner while holding our crying son. My eyes were heavy, my arms even heavier. I set our son in his swing right next to me, hoping he'd settle just long enough for me to finish cooking, but my body had other plans. I nodded off, only to be jolted awake by the smell of burning. The casserole I had put in the oven was smoking, the kitchen filled with the acrid scent of charred food. Mrs. White rushed into the kitchen, her face contorted with anger. "What is this? Are you trying to burn the house down?" she screamed as she yanked the oven door open and pulled out the ruined dish. I just fell asleep for a moment," I stammered, trying to explain, to apologize. "That's no excuse. You're wasting food and endangering us all," she scolded fiercely. "You're not eating tonight. Maybe that'll teach you to stay awake." I was too tired to argue, too defeated to fight back. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. That night, Mark came home late, reeking of alcohol. He stumbled into the nursery where I was trying to soothe our son back to sleep. The baby's crying seemed to pierce right through Mark's last nerve. "Can't you keep him quiet?" he slurred, his voice loud and harsh. "I'm trying," I whispered, my voice shaky. Mark shoved past me in fury, his shoulder hitting mine hard enough to send me stumbling into the doorframe, still holding our son. Fear and pain flashed through me, but it was the look of fright on my little boy's face that finally broke me. I had been planning my escape quietly, waiting for the right moment when everything aligned. The final trigger was the next transfer of money from Dad. Once it hit my account, I knew I had everything I needed to get away. I chose a day when I knew Mark and his mother would be out. I didn't pack much, just a bag with the essentials for me and my baby. It was hard to think I was leaving my life behind, but the thought of another day in that house was unbearable. I dressed quickly, pulling on an old jacket, and wrapping my son up warmly against the chill. I called a taxi, my hand shaking slightly as I did. The drive to the airport was the longest of my life, every minute ticking by slowly, filled with the fear of being followed or found out. At the airport, I bought our tickets with the cash I had withdrawn, using the money Dad sent. My heart pounded in my chest all the way through security and didn't settle until we were seated on the plane, the doors closed and locked for takeoff. We landed in Alaska late at night. The cold air hit me hard as we stepped off the plane, a stark reminder of the world I had left behind. I took another taxi directly to Dad's house, clutching my son to my chest, feeling his warmth and the beating of his small heart. When I rang the doorbell, it was past midnight. I was exhausted, emotionally and physically, my hair tangled, my face stained with tears. Dad opened the door, and his face, initially confused, dropped in shock when he saw the state I was in. "Emily, what's happened?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. "Dad, I need help. Please save me," I sobbed, the weight of the past months pouring out in those words. Once we were settled in the living room, Clara handed me a cup of hot tea. The warmth was a small comfort against the chill that had settled deep inside me. I began to tell them everything, the control, the abuse, how isolated I'd become. When I showed them the bruises, marks I'd hidden under clothes and makeup, Dad's face turned hard, his fists clenched in anger. "I'm calling the police and we're getting the best lawyers. No one treats my daughter like this," he said with a resolve that made me believe for the first time in a long time that everything might actually be okay. Life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known for years back here in Dad's house, with the crisp Alaskan air filling my lungs each morning. After all the legal battles, the dust finally settled. My divorce from Mark went through without a hitch, and the courts didn't go easy on him. After hearing about everything, he was fined for the abuse. Seeing justice served, was a relief I can't put into words. It wasn't just about him either. The lawyers dug deep and found out that a lot of the money Dad sent to support me had been swindled by Mark and his mother. Over $200,000. Can you believe it? They were ordered to pay it all back, but of course, they didn't have that kind of cash lying around. They ended up having to sell the house to cover the debts. I heard through the grapevine that Mark's been shunned by most of his friends and can't even land a decent job now. And Mrs. White? Well, she's clocking in hours at some job now, and they both downsized to a small apartment in a not-so-great part of town. It's a far cry from the life she made me miserable in. Dad and Clara have been my rocks. Clara's turned into the grandmother my son never had, and Dad, well, he's just been amazing. They adore the little guy, and having their support means I can start thinking about the future again, really planning, not just surviving. Just this morning, over coffee, Dad and I were out on the porch watching the sunrise. He turned to me, his eyes all serious but kind. "Em, you thinking about what's next? You've got a whole life ahead to rebuild." I nodded, cradling my mug. "Yeah, Dad, I am. Thinking of maybe starting a small business, something from home so I can stay with the little guy." "That's my girl," Dad said, his voice rough with pride. "You ever need help, you know where to find me." And that's just it. I do know. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm where I need to be. Later, I met up with Mia and a few other friends from back in the day. They all crowded around, eager to catch up, their faces full of genuine concern and happiness to have me back. "Girl, it's like you've come back from the war," Mia joked as we sat down at our old hangout spot. "I kinda did," I laughed. And it felt good to laugh about it now, to talk about my plans, about moving forward. "We're just glad you're okay, Emily, really okay," another friend chimed in, and I felt a warmth spread through me. "Yeah, I'm okay, better than okay. I'm home, I'm safe, and as I lay down each night, with my son sleeping soundly next door, I think about how we've both been given a second chance at happiness, and this time around, I'm going to make sure we grab it with both hands." Even if you try to make things difficult for us, it won't cost you much. After all, it's your money, and we're just poor folks from humble backgrounds. I sighed as I finished the final check. "You're closing your account, correct?" "Go ahead." Your mocking tone and the disdain in your eyes made me sick. I decided it was time to show those who judge others based on their background a taste of their own medicine. With that thought in mind, I smiled. "My name is Lily. I'm a 29-year-old office worker, currently living a peaceful life with my mom while working. My dad passed away from an illness when I was young. His chronic illness had worsened early. My father, who was involved in various businesses, was always busy with work, out early and back late. Even so, he treasured his family time, and I have fond memories of playing with him on his days off. Mom and I were initially shocked by Dad's death, but Mom, not wanting me to feel lonely, cherished our time together. Fortunately, when Dad fell ill, he made sure with the former CEO to secure enough funds for our livelihood. Thanks to that, I was able to go to college. Both Dad's and Mom's parents were very supportive, especially my paternal grandparents, who lived nearby and took great care of me when Mom was at work. We still go back to both sets of grandparents for holidays like Christmas and spend time together. I am who I am today, thanks to the support of many people. To give back, I went to a national university and got a job at a major company. I thought about working at the bank my dad was supposed to inherit, but I chose a career I loved. You're being told to do what you love. I've already handed the bank over, don't worry about it. Thanks to a fulfilling home environment and the freedom to dive into hobbies, I had no interest in romance. But now, at a mature age, many of my friends are married with kids. This led me to think about marriage. And that's when a certain encounter happened. I never imagined this meeting would lead to a major incident. "Hey, Lily, aren't you interested in love?" That was the starting point. A question from a colleague at work. We've been close since our rookie days. I have an acquaintance who's struggling to find a match. He's well educated and handsome. You're highly educated too, Lily. Maybe you'd like to meet him. Really? I've always thought it's a waste for someone as high speed as you, Lily. There are even a few people in the office who are after you. She has a wide network and always shares various stories. She's living with her boyfriend she met at a party and seems very happy. She's quite concerned about my lack of romantic involvement. I had even consulted her about marriage, leading to this arrangement. A few days later, I agreed to meet a man named Yosef. The rendezvous was at a cafe. As I waited nervously, a man approached me. "Lily?" "Yes, nice to meet you. You're Yosef, right?" "Yes, thank you for today." Yosef's expression was blank as he looked me over. It felt like he was sizing me up, and I was a bit taken aback. Then, taking a seat opposite me, he quickly started the conversation. "What do you do for work, Lily?" I work in sales at a company. I've always enjoyed interacting with people and making use of my opinions, which is why I chose sales. I find it fulfilling, and I love the moments when customers are happy with their purchases. "What's the name of your company?" I told him the name of my company. Upon hearing it, Yosef paused for a moment, then smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile, more like one of satisfaction. My company is quite a large enterprise with good performance. We're well trusted by our customers, I believe. Since he asked, I decided to return the question. "What do you do?" At my question, Yosef snorted with pride and began to boast. "I work at Sunrise Bank as a department head. Sunrise Bank is a really big bank, you know. The work is tough, not something ordinary people can handle. But since my dad is the CEO and I'm the successor, it's different for me." I felt a stir in my chest at Yosef's words. I was expecting a normal response, but Yosef's aggressively toned words made me feel uncomfortable. Indeed, Sunrise Bank is a major bank. I knew about Sunrise Bank due to a certain incident, but I was surprised to learn that Yosef worked there as a department head. Wow, that's impressive. Sunrise Bank is a big place, isn't it? I flattered Yosef on purpose. I saw no need to be rude and thought this would probably be our last meeting. I figured it was better to be nice. Pleased with my flattery, Yosef continued to boast about himself. Honestly, talking to him was painful. He did listen to me occasionally, but always turned the conversation back to himself, even making outrageous comments about his lack of romantic prospects. I'm quite popular, you know, but it's always people who don't match my family background or education level that come to me. I thought the problem might be his attitude, but I had already decided not to meet him again after informing my friend. As time passed, Yosef, still looking satisfied, made a suggestion. "I'd really like to meet your parents." "Huh? But we just met today." That's exactly why. Parents' excellence is important, especially if we're going to date, right? Inside I screamed, "I have no intention of dating you." But he seemed oblivious to my discomfort and kept pushing forward. "When are your parents in? Are you available?" "I'll have to discuss it with my mom." What about your dad?" As Yosef pressed on, I felt a growing sense of disgust, but couldn't find the strength to cut him off. My dad passed away when I was young." At my words, Yosef narrowed his eyes. Suddenly waiting for him to speak, Yosef just said, "I see," and fell silent. "Well, send me a date that works for you later. I'll adjust my schedule." "No, thank you. Should we leave then?" Before I could finish, Yosef stood up. It felt like talking to someone from a different world. Despite my reluctance, I had given him my contact information and even discussed meeting our parents. His disdainful look upon hearing about my father's absence bothered me. In the end, we agreed to meet again with our parents. When I explained this to Mom, she smiled. "Riley, maybe you were just nervous because you haven't dated before." "Maybe, but the way he spoke was weird." "Well, his parents will be there, right? Just say no if it doesn't feel right. I'll be there too." "Thanks, Mom. Sorry for dragging you into this." As I apologized, feeling guilty, Mom laughed heartily. "It's okay. No need for you to feel bad. Besides, I'm curious about Sunrise Bank. So let's see how it goes." So, Yosef and I arranged a family meeting. At that time, I had no idea Yosef had planned the meeting for such a shocking purpose. On the day of the meeting, we arrived at the place Yosef had chosen. It was a fancy restaurant. It's a big place, isn't it? Yes, it is. Inside, our table was ready, but Aesop hadn't arrived yet. We entered and waited. Shortly after the scheduled time, Aesop and his family arrived. "Sorry we're late. The traffic was terrible." "Nice to meet you. Thank you for today." Yosef's family unapologetically took their seats. Irritated but not wanting to start a fight, I initiated the family meeting. After some time, Yosef's mom, Morgan, with a sly smile, spoke up. "So where is your father? Is he coming later?" I looked at Aesop, but he just smirked dismissively and said nothing. I had already told him my dad was deceased. Morgan acted as if she didn't know, despite having agreed to meet our families. Mom quickly responded, "In my stead, my husband passed away from illness when Lily was young, so today I'm here as her mother." Mom responded with a calm smile. In contrast, Morgan raised her voice in an exaggerated manner. "Oh, my Lily is from a single-parent family." I was taken aback by her words. Even after saying my father passed away from illness, her tone clearly carried malice. Being from a single-parent family, life must be quite hard, huh? But she graduated from a public university. That's commendable, right? Really? But still, being from a single-parent family, wouldn't dating her be complicated? Aesop's family's conversation left Mom and me utterly dumbfounded. Despite being present, they spoke so disrespectfully, mocking us as if being from a single-parent family was something bad. Such words aren't suitable for a first meeting. Angered, I retorted in a low voice, "Excuse me, but after Dad passed away, Mom raised me with great care. I owe my current life to her, and isn't it rude to speak about someone like that when you've just met?" Lily, however, Morgan burst out laughing at my words. "Rude? Isn't it more absurd for the daughter of a single parent to think about marrying into a high-class family?" I'm not really into strong-willed women. This is pointless. There's no getting through to them." Thinking this, I just stared at them in disbelief. I had high hopes since she works at a major company. "Well, you'll eventually carry on. Sunrise Bank, so maybe she's not quite at your level." As they hurled more insults, I felt no need to listen anymore. Trembling with anger, Mom glared at them. "Did you invite us here today just to look down on us? I've heard from Lily about the other day. You're enjoying berating us for being a single-parent family, aren't you?" It was the first time I heard her speak so sternly. "Please stop with the accusations. It was just a little teasing, right?" No one feels good being mocked, and all your remarks are condescending. We have no intention of listening to this any further. Yep's family looked displeased at Mom's clear statement. Presumptuous for commoners. Commoners, huh? Indeed, that may be the case, but this has made up my mind, Mom said. Yep's family looked briefly surprised at Mom's words, then burst into laughter. They seemed to be thinking, what can you possibly do? Mom sighed and began to speak. Actually, we have funds deposited with your bank, but we don't wish to entrust them to people like you. Oh, really? But we don't know your name, so it can't be much, right? It's probably insignificant, they replied. That's right. Even if you try to trouble us with your funds, it won't really affect us. Low-class poor people are not needed, they continued. I realized that even Mom's last attempt at reconciliation was in vain, but they continued to speak disdainfully. Unaware, I sighed and made the final confirmation. We're closing our account. Okay, go ahead, they said, with a mocking tone and clearly disdainful expressions. Yosef's family looked at us. I thought to myself, let's make those who judge others by their background suffer a bit. I smiled at the thought. Is that so? Then we will proceed as such, and please consider this meeting never to have happened. Of course, we had no intention of marrying a daughter from a single-parent family. Well then, we will take our leave now. Mom and I stood up. Oh, don't worry about today's bill. It's too expensive for you. Is that so? With that, our family meeting ended. Later, I made a phone call. Weeks later, my mobile phone was flooded with calls from Aita. Of course, I had anticipated this and had no intention of answering. It was their own responsibility. I immediately blocked the number. A few days later, I received a call from Grandpa Kyle. Summoned by Kyle, Mom and I headed to Sunrise Bank in the meeting room. Aita's family, looking pale, was present. As soon as they saw us, Morgan stood up and rushed over to bow deeply. I am extremely sorry for what happened. I didn't reply to Morgan's words. I just smiled and began to speak. What exactly are you apologizing for? At my words, Morgan bit her lip hard, trembling with anger. That's understandable. There are too many things for which they should apologize. That's probably why she's feeling so frustrated. This whole situation started because I said we would close our account that day. Our account wasn't particularly large. Closing it wouldn't have caused much damage. But Kyle's case was different. Kyle managed the inheritance left by my dad at Sunrise Bank for our benefit. Kyle also had his own account there. If all accounts, including Kyle's and my dad's inheritance, were closed, it would total about $7 million. In other words, their disrespect decided the closure. And importantly, Kyle is the former CEO of the bank. Dad was supposed to take over the bank, but passed away young, so the position went to Scott. I didn't know that Lily was related to the former CEO. Scott, looking anxious, pleaded as if making an excuse. But that's no excuse. Even if they didn't know, their prejudice against our family is their own fault. You mean if we were relatives, you would have treated us differently? Hey, don't talk to Dad like that. It's your fault for not telling us from the start that your grandpa was the former CEO. I don't have any obligation to tell a stranger like you that. Besides, you were the one who started it and made fun of us. Remember Aita? Unable to retort to my words, narrowed his eyes in frustration. You insulted me knowing I was from a single-parent family. When I said I would transfer the bank due to insecurity, you told us to go ahead. We just did as we were told. But it's just that. It may be just that for you, but have you ever thought about the feelings of someone whose family has been insulted? Silence fell. Morgan was trembling, looking hopeless, and Scott was hanging his head. But Aesop still seemed unconvinced, his face full of dissatisfaction. Getting all high and mighty just because people talk to you, Aesop remains unrepentant. At that moment, the door to the conference room opened, and Kyle appeared. Seeing Kyle's face got, and Morgan turned even paler, frozen in place. Only Aesop glared at me. Even after giving you a chance to reflect, you're still only thinking about yourselves, Kyle said. It's not my fault, it's her. Watch your words. If you continue, you'll end up even more miserable. Aesop, silenced by Kyle's words, glared at me again. Then, as if resigned, he burst out, "No way. Who would think a single parent's relative was the former CEO? You knew I was the future CEO and came to the family meeting just to mock us." "Aesop, be quiet." Kyle glared sternly at Aesop, who was breathing heavily. "Future CEO, huh?" Kyle then turned his gaze to Scott. Scott shrank even more under Kyle's gaze. "I understand wanting to leave the bank to your son, but now that I know his mindset, it's impossible for him to continue as CEO." "That's ridiculous." "Over something like this?" Scott started to retort, but sat down again under Kyle's gaze. "You still don't understand that your attitude is the problem. Though I'm retired, the board will decide. If you have something to say it to them. Remember, we recorded the previous conversation in this one. Don't forget that the voice recorder will serve as evidence." I took out a voice recorder in front of the three. Impressed, I played the recorder. It started playing back our conversation from the other day. "How dare you prepare something like that? It's unfair." "It was just a precaution, but remember, you forced me into this situation." Aesop had nothing to say in return, and their faces turned pale. "Thank you. We'll handle it from here," they said. So Mom and I left. Ultimately, Kyle didn't transfer the funds, at least not officially. Scott was removed from his CEO position, and Aesop was demoted. Seemingly unable to handle the blow to his pride, Aesop resigned voluntarily. Kyle's influence in the financial industry meant Aesop would struggle to find work in the same field again. Whether Scott knew this or not, he seemed determined to work until retirement, but Kyle said it would be tough for him both mentally and physically. Morgan, who used to wield power as the CEO's wife, apparently started part-time work to maintain her lifestyle, but her character likely made it hard for her to keep a job. "I'm really sorry." "It's okay. You didn't know, right? I only shared what happened with a friend who introduced me to Aesop. She just heard about him through someone else and wasn't at fault." Mom was initially concerned about being a single parent, but I'm happy now and can live thanks to the support I've received. When I told her that, she smiled and said, "Thank you." After everything was taken care of, Kyle told us to come over to his house again sometime. I'm really grateful for Kyle's help in resolving the situation. "Hey, who was tough? But I'm happy now, so it's okay. I have some good news for you." "Really? It's not about dating again, is it?" "It's a friend of my boyfriend. This time he's definitely a good guy. I'm not interested in dating right now, but I'm satisfied with my current life. I want to keep cherishing those who support me, and maybe someday I'll meet someone I really click with." My brother asked us to come because he called. We won't be contributing a cent to the rent or utilities, so you had better get on it, Ashley. I work in the finance sector. Bob used to be a mechanic when we started dating, so moving back into my childhood home seemed like the perfect option. I should clarify. When I say childhood home, my parents do not currently live there, but it is where I am from. In fact, my family home is an old barn conversion that was once our family business, which Dad used to run as the CEO. I have a brother who was supposedly on the track to take over my father's business, so he majored in economics. My talented brother also attended school at Oxford University and worked in business management to come back home, work under my father for a few years. Eventually, my parents wanted to enjoy their retirement and moved to a place like Aspen, Colorado, seeming to enjoy their relaxed life surrounded by nature. Since my brother was given the company in return, my parents passed down the family home to me, their daughter, and I decided to live there with my husband. The house is conveniently located with excellent access to public transportation, less than a 5-minute walk from the train station. Commercial facilities, hospitals, and schools are also within walking distance. Considering the future when our children leave the nest, we will be able to live comfortably. So in that sense, I am grateful that my parents gave me this house. We were planning on expanding our family and living happily, but we never thought that our life would come to a sudden end because of such an incident. After moving into this house, my mother-in-law started to visit frequently. Knowing that my parents run a business, my mother-in-law often asks about money. Since we got married, she would say things like, "Hey, Ashley, how much assets do your parents have? When your parents pass away, how much will you inherit?" She often talks about these things, and I couldn't help but think that she was rather distasteful. I didn't want to be too blunt, so I replied, I wonder how much. I've never really thought about it, so I don't know. I've already received the house, so I might not get any money." Although I laughed and responded lightly, she said, "That can't be true, can it? Your parents are over 60. You never know what might happen. They must have discussed their assets with you." She seemed to be so interested in the asset discussion that at that moment, I was convinced that she was counting on my parents' wealth. I already knew how much I would receive, but I decided to keep silent, thinking it would be better not to tell my mother-in-law or my husband, who is close to her. However, an unthinkable incident occurred after this. Suddenly, without any notice, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family moved into our house. Around 8 a.m., on a holiday, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, and when I opened the door, there were movers. "Huh? Why are the movers here?" As I was surprised and confused, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family arrived and said, "We're going to be living here from today, so please take care of us." When I saw their grinning faces, I got chills down my spine. Just then, my husband woke up, and when I asked him to explain the situation, he said nonchalantly, "What's the problem if Mom and the others move into this house? It's so spacious, so you should be able to spare some room." He spoke as if it was only natural to give them some space. I was surprised enough that we were living together, but then my sister-in-law said something even more outrageous. "We were invited by Brother Ashley since he called us. We're not going to pay any rent or utilities, so we're counting on you, Ashley." As for my brother-in-law, he intruded into various rooms without permission and said, "This room has good sunlight, so give it to us. Bob, move all the stuff in here out to the hallway." I felt dizzy at this exchange. This is my house, but they are opening rooms here and there, trying to use them as their own. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family have been lacking common sense for a while, especially my sister-in-law, who had rummaged through my bag without permission before. If things continue like this, they'll take over my room. Enough is enough. This is my house. Why are you acting like you own this place? I've had it. I want everyone to get out. I normally don't lose my cool or raise my voice in anger, but having these people move into the house my parents gave me without permission and treating it like it was theirs was something I could not stand. That's why I lost control of my emotions and shouted at all three of them. But then something unexpected happened. How dare you talk to us like that? You're the one who should get out." The moment those words were spoken, I felt a severe pain in my cheek. Wait, did I get slapped? I realized what had happened a few seconds after being hit. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what had happened, and all that was left was a throbbing pain in my cheek. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. It goes without saying that I can't live with people who would do something like this, but this house is mine. I don't want them living here like parasites. I packed up my things to leave the house, intending to inform my family about this. I had to find a place far away from home, so I rented a monthly apartment for the time being. From there, I would have to commute to work. The moment I told my parents about it over the phone, I could tell they were furious even through the phone, especially my dad. He is very doting and has always adored me and my brother. He was a strict CEO, but as a father, he was always kind and quick to help when we were in trouble. I didn't want to involve my parents, who were just about to retire, in something like this. But I was forced to because my inherited house was being taken away from me while I was living in the monthly apartment. I was sure, though, that my husband and his family were freely using my house. So I decided to do something that my brother and father suggested. A few days later, I checked my phone during my break and found dozens of missed calls and messages from my husband. Well, I knew why he was calling. I had called the water company and the electric company to cut off the utilities. Our house is all electric, so nothing works without electricity. And we haven't installed solar panels yet, so there's no way to supply electricity. It's very hot right now, so it must be pretty tough without electricity and water. The calls from my husband were probably to do something about it. Just as I was about to ignore it, my husband called again, timing it perfectly with my break. "Hey, what's going on? There's no electricity and the water isn't working. You stopped the electricity and water, didn't you?" I could clearly imagine the panic state my husband was in from his voice over the phone. The house is mine, so now that I'm gone, there's no way I can leave the electricity and water on, right? That's why I had it cut off. If I left the utilities on, I would have to pay the bills even though I'm not living there. I can't accept that, so naturally, I had it cut off. At this, my husband was furious and demanded that I renew the contract immediately. Just because he says to renew it doesn't mean I'm going to say okay. If they want to renew it, they should do it with their own money. But whenever it comes to this, they always say things like, "It's your house, so you should pay." So their words and actions don't match anyway. I have no intention of renewing the contract or paying. If you don't like it, then get out of the house right away. After saying only that, I hung up the phone because my break was ending. Afterwards, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law all called me. All of them were saying the same thing. They wanted me to get the electricity and water hooked up. Their room was hot and uncomfortable. They said it was inconvenient without water. But all of this was their problem, not mine. After listening to everything they said, I told them to handle it themselves and hung up the phone. I figured they were just greedy for money and thought they would give up and leave soon. However, even after a week passed, there was no sign of them leaving. So, I decided to push them further. I consulted with my father's company's lawyer about the situation and asked him to send a notice to my husband. The content of the notice was about trespassing. They had barged into the house I owned without any consultation, drove me out of it, and were using it as their own. I explained to the four of them who used this malicious tactic that I was considering taking legal action. Hey, what's going on? Why did I get such a document from a lawyer? Was it necessary to go this far? My husband, who seemed panicked and not expecting me to go this far, came to me for a settlement. Knowing how concerned they are about their public image, the prospect of being sued would be extremely damaging to them mentally. They definitely want to avoid dealing with a lawyer at all costs, but they don't want to give up their current lifestyle. So, they're probably scheming to persuade me to let them continue their current lifestyle. I can see through what my husband is thinking, like it's in the palm of my hand. That said, there's no way I can listen to what they have to say, so I didn't comply with my husband. At this, my husband finally exploded in anger. Forgetting that he was at work, he yelled at me loudly, "Cut it out. Are you getting carried away just because we're a little underhanded? Doesn't mean you can act so high and mighty. Go back to how things were right now and drop the lawyer." Even though he yelled in anger, it didn't affect me at all. On the contrary, I was annoyed by his phone call, thinking, who do you think you are taking over someone else's house? No matter what you say or shout at me, my feelings won't change. If you continue to squat there, I will take legal action. You better think hard before you act. Over the phone, my husband was still shrieking, but I ignored him and hung up the phone. This is a waste of time, and I've already talked to my lawyer about divorce. When I got home, I had received calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but I knew they were just going to talk about settling the matter. I didn't want to waste any more time, so I blocked their numbers to prevent further calls. After that, my prideful husband's family couldn't bear the idea of being sued, so they packed their bags and vacated the house. Then the lawyer intervened, and the divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly. I also had a house cleaning service come in, and finally, I was able to return to my sparkling clean house. Living apart from my husband's family, and then in a monthly rental, was comfortable. But, of course, living in my own home is the best. The house is pretty worn down in some places, so I need to consider renovating soon. I consulted with my father, and he introduced me to a good contractor, so I started consulting about the renovation. Living alone is really comfortable. I'm not bound by anyone. I can lie around on the sofa without getting scolded. I can eat whatever I want without anyone saying anything. While I was enjoying my current life, I received a call from my ex-husband for the first time in 3 months. At first, I didn't answer the phone because I didn't recognize the number. But when the call kept coming from the same number, I thought it might be from a contractor, so I reluctantly answered. However, as soon as I recognized the voice, my mood was completely ruined. It was my ex-husband, whom I had divorced 3 months ago. I had already divorced him with the intervention of a lawyer. We even made a promise never to approach each other again. So, what on earth does he want now? Changing his phone number just to call me is strange, no matter how you look at it. We promised through our lawyer not to see or contact each other again. There's nothing left for us to talk about, so please don't contact me anymore. Right as I was about to hang up the phone, he said, "Hold on a minute, please. I just need you to listen, just for a little while. I'm begging you." With that, he started talking without any permission from me. Apparently, my ex-husband's company is facing a serious financial crisis, and it's been decided that his salary will be reduced. My mother-in-law's health is not good, and she is unable to work. My sister-in-law and her husband can't contribute to the living expenses since he isn't working a steady job. My sister-in-law is working multiple part-time jobs, but most of her paycheck is being used to pay off the debt that my brother-in-law made. The situation was desperate, as my ex-husband was trying hard to make ends meet, but with his salary getting cut, it will become increasingly difficult to survive. Well, hearing all that, I couldn't think of anything but, okay, is that so? They intruded into my house without my permission. did whatever they pleased, and then tried to kick me out. It's simply unbelievable. I feel nothing for the people who did such a thing, and I have no sympathy for them. Even if you tell me these things, it doesn't solve anything. It's your family. You should deal with it yourself. There's nothing I can do about it." At my words, my ex-husband started to panic even more. "Don't say things like that. We're in serious trouble. We won't even be able to pay the rent for the apartment, and we'll be struggling for food tomorrow. Hey, we used to be a family, right? Please help us," he pleaded in a voice close to crying. But I was not convinced. When I was in trouble, he did nothing to help and looked down on me along with my mother-in-law. Just like my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law have also always looked down on me. They insulted me for my plain appearance or my old-fashioned way of thinking. They told me not to come around because they said I was so stiff and outdated that it was rubbing off on them, and they didn't care how hurt I was. As for my mother-in-law, she not only made things worse, but also pushed me to have a baby as soon as possible. She forced strange herbal medicines on me, made unnecessary doctor's appointments, and told all the neighbors that I was a barren wife. Looking back, there wasn't a single good thing about my marriage. My ex-husband, who used to be so kind before we got married, started to become my mother-in-law's puppet after the wedding. The first day my mother-in-law stormed into our house, I was out because I had an appointment. Apparently, my mother-in-law was upset by this and cried to my husband. I wanted to see Ashley, but she wasn't there. I want to be friends with Ashley. I'm sad. After hearing his mother cry, my ex-husband yelled at me without listening to my side of the story. She said that she wanted to get along, but all she ever did when we met was bad-mouth me. My son seems to have lost weight recently. Is it because your cooking is so bad that he can't eat properly? She said things like this loudly, whether we were at home or outside, so there was no way we could get along. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law also joined in laughing at me. I can't help people who act like this anymore. No matter what you say, my feelings won't change. I can't help you guys, so I'm going to hang up now and don't ever contact me again. With that, I finally hung up the phone and blocked the new number. Knowing my ex-husband, he might change his number and try to contact me again. So I decided to change my phone number at the store over the weekend. But before that, those four took action. They broke the promise of the lawyer and suddenly came to my house at 11 p.m. "Open up. Let us in and take care of us. We're family. You should help us." They were banging on the door and yelling without considering the time. "Hey, what's the matter at this hour? Please go back home as it's causing a nuisance to the neighbors." When I went to open the door, they seemed ready to barge in. So I figured I'd try talking through the intercom, but the four of them didn't care. They started banging on the door and raising a ruckus. I couldn't believe I was dealing with people this out of control. I was left holding my head in my hands, considering calling the cops when I heard sirens from outside. It looked like a neighbor had taken the initiative. As soon as they heard the police sirens, the surprise group thought I had called the police and tried to run away. By then, a crowd had gathered, and escape was not an option. The four of them were escorted to the police station by the responding officers. I was questioned about the incident and explained everything that had happened. After that, the word about what my ex-husband and his pals had done spread quickly in the neighborhood. It turned out that among the crowds that had gathered was a co-worker of my ex-husband's. By the next day, the whole office knew what had happened. They were pissed off and gave him the boot. Not long after making less money anyway, thanks to his pay cut. Well, my ex-husband was eventually fired from his job and couldn't pay the rent for his apartment. Hamilton lost his place in the group, they say, and access to its safety net of food. His estrangement from his sister's family followed a run of money problems that one social worker describes as a perfect storm. Bob is now homeless, living in public housing with his mother and working 3 part-time jobs to pay the bills. His mother, too, has taken on a part-time job of 2 4 days each week in the hope of making some cash.